Are you ready to break free from the doubts and limits holding you back? Welcome to Embrace Your Value, where therapy meets coaching to help you unlock your true worth and take control of your life.
Hi, I'm Kristen, a trauma therapist dedicated to helping you heal, break old patterns, and reclaim your power.
And I'm Jen, your support coach, here to show you how to set fierce boundaries, embrace self-compassion, and step boldly into the life you deserve.
So whether you're stuck in self-doubt or feeling lost, know this: your value isn't up for negotiation. It's time to own it.
Every week, we tackle real issues that challenge, inspire, and empower you to live with purpose and confidence.
So grab your favorite drink, take a deep breath, and let's get started.
Because you're not here to play small. It's time to embrace your value. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Embrace Your Value. We are excited to have you back with us again this week. And you know us, we always like to do something new and fun and exciting. And so today I am going to interview Kristen, our neighborhood-friendly trauma therapist. And she is going to talk to us about how trauma shows up in your daily life and what you can do about it. So, Kristen, thank you for being willing to do this for us. And yeah, let's dive in.
Sounds good, Jen. I'm so excited to talk about trauma.
Awesome. Okay. So, Kristen, when people hear the word trauma, many think of big dramatic event. But what do you wish more people understood about the spectrum of trauma?
Yeah, this is a great initial question because I hear this a lot. I haven't been to war, I haven't had some kind of major traumatic event happen in my life that people associate with PTSD. PTSD just stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. And what that means is your daily life has not adjusted after a traumatic event. So in the therapy space, we talk about big T's, and those are the big things like big losses or an accident or abuse, war, things like that. Like those are big T's. The little T's are the smaller things that can happen to us in our everyday life, depending on what's going on. And I can't categorize what's a big T for you and what's a little T for you because it all depends on what your life has been like and what your lens is. So that's the thing I wish people would understand is that it really does go from pretty small, depending on your lens, to like some of these big giant things.
I think that's really good for people to hear and to know, because I don't think everybody talks about that. I know I always thought for the longest time that trauma was just really big stuff. And yeah, thank you for explaining that. So how does unresolved trauma show up in someone's day-to-day life, especially for women who might be really high functioning or like big executives that could actually have a lot of trauma and not?
Well, I would say none of us get out of life without trauma. Again, it's just sometimes things are big and sometimes things are small. So if we look at, if we just take the cross section of women who are high functioning, top execs, things like that, it shows up as literal high functioning. It's like, I have to be the best. I have to do it all. The I have to's and very little I want to's. And so it's when we do the I have to's and I should and I must and things like that. That's one of the ways that trauma can show up, especially for women, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So this goes right into that. So can you explain how trauma lives in the body, not just the brain? Maybe even give some examples of physical or emotional signs that someone might be carrying trauma, even if they don't realize it?
Oh, absolutely. a firm believer that trauma lives as almost as an energy inside the body, and it can create such a wide spectrum of things that I'm just going to have to narrow it down to maybe the most common. So it would be things like an emotional thing would be overthinking or trying to figure out all of the different ways that something could go wrong. That's one way, is because if we know all the answers, we don't have to be fearful or scared. Physically, it comes across as a lot of times people have physical pain because of inflammation that trauma creates in the body. It has been researched that some immune disorders, the ones that derive from like inflammation, can be exacerbated by trauma and sometimes even start as the result of trauma. And that's just like the one big, massive way. But it could be headaches, it could be nervous tics, it could be your heart starts beating really fast and you don't always know why. Your vision narrows, suddenly you blank out, or you feel like you don't know what's going on, and then you kind of snap to. Those are some of what I think are the most common ones.
That's really helpful. That's really good. So let's talk about emotional and behavioral patterns. What are some common emotional responses or habits that are really trauma in disguise?
Yeah, I mean, I think people just, especially people who felt this way for their whole lives, right? It's like, oh, I've always just been nervous, or I've always been an overthinker, or like just that this is how they've forever been as early as they can remember. So I think those are the people that maybe have adapted to the trauma responses so much that they have sort of integrated them as what they feel like is normal. Right. So some of those things could be, like I mentioned before, like the overthinking. The thing I notice all the time is sort of just like a foot tapping or a nervous tick, or people will pick their fingernails, or like my son will chew his hair, like how when he's nervous, or he'll start pacing around the house. And I'm like, hey, what's going on, bud? But I think those are some of the ways, in addition to the things I've already mentioned. Like I would say overthinking is probably one of the most common trauma responses that I could ever mention, and not sleeping well. Those are the two big ones.
Yeah, that's really important. So now let's talk about our favorite subject, boundaries. How does unhealed trauma impact a woman's ability to say no, ask for what she needs, or even just trust herself?
Yes to all of those things. So depending on what kind of trauma there is, the ability to say no could be rooted in people pleasing, or in not wanting people to dislike us, or even not feeling like you're worthy of saying no. Same with asking for what you need, right? Like, oh, I don't deserve to ask for help. I don't deserve to ask somebody to give me attention or love. So I'm just going to take whatever I can get because this is all I deserve. I had a client the other day say, I deserve to be miserable because of all the things that I have done wrong. And I was just like, no, like nobody deserves to be miserable. And then trusting yourself, I think that's hard. I think it's hard for those of us who don't have big T's, I think that's just like a life thing that you really have to learn, unless your parents really did a good job teaching you how to problem solve and good executive functioning skills and critical thinking and ways that you could solve problems and do things, and really trust that you're getting to the right answer, or really trust that, even more important, like, even if I don't get to the right place, I can still be okay.
That whole overthinking thing it's a killer for all of us. It just is. So what are some examples of trauma responses that often get praised? So like overworking or being hyper independent, but those are really survival strategies. I think that women really need to hear this.
Yes, absolutely. Two really big things that I have definitely been guilty of in my past. So hyper independence for me looks like I'm not going to ask for help. I can do it myself. Or if someone says, I can't right now, I'll be like, that's okay. I got it. No problem. I'll take care of it with all this like sarcasm in my voice going, I finally reached out and asked for help and this is what you're giving me. So like, that's what hyper independence can look like. Overworking, that for sure. I mean, I think those are probably the two biggest ones that you mentioned. Overworking is one of those things that you're looking for approval or praise or acceptance because you go over and above. And that can look as much like I had a client and she was like, I'm a terrible mom because I don't sit down and do crafts with my kids every day like the rest of my neighbors do. And I'm like, girl, you work a full-time job. They stay at home, but even stay-at-home moms, like the thought that you're going to sit there and do arts and crafts with your kids every day, like that, I love enrichment for the children. Don't get me wrong, but be realistic about what we can do as humans. And to overdo and overdo, it exhausts us. And then we can't be there for the people that we love.
Yeah. And that's where, like, when my clients bring stuff like that in, that's where I try to find their strengths with them and really try to like show them the evidence of the goodness that they provide for their kids. Whether their neighbors are doing it or not, we stop the comparison, right? That we really find that evidence. So I love that. It's going to be hard day in and day out, just kind of hearing all of that and really not owning it. It's a whole nother topic for a whole nother time, which I think we've talked about a few times, but like my heart hurts with a couple things you've already said, and it's got to make for a really hard day sometimes, I bet.
Yeah, it could be a hard day. Obviously, I have training. Obviously, I have my own supports and my own things that I do. And I think therapists don't maybe do enough of that, getting their own support. So I like it when I see Facebook groups and things like that. And, I've got other therapists here in the building, so we can stop and chat. But I would say my key is this was true when I was doing other facets in my life, like sales or admin stuff. It was like my door closes and I leave it in there. And then I come back the next day renewed. And after having let all that go, another reason why, Jen, like I would never have my office in my home. I know that you do that. And I think that's admirable. But for me, that would be an absolute no-go because I need to shut that door and walk out of the building. That's just my personal way of dealing with it.
Well, I totally get that. And I did do that when I worked a different job. I did totally do that. And I do find a really good way. Like, I don't take this out into our main living spaces. So for me, everything stays in this office. And so that works really well. But I love that. That's great. Let's flip the script. You have done an amazing job of giving us examples and ways that trauma shows up and really defining it. But what are a few things that someone can start doing today to begin healing trauma responses, even if they're not quite ready for therapy yet?
I would say, I think the best thing that you can do is to understand what your trauma responses are and what triggers them. Right. So, for example, if we're a people pleaser and that's one of our trauma responses, it's when somebody doesn't accept you or you've said yes for the 300th time and you're feeling exhausted about it. Go, what's this really about? Is it really that I'm exhausted because I'm doing too much? Am I exhausted because I've said yes more than I have taken time for myself? And so I just think some reflection for people is probably a good first step. And then you're kind of ready, right? You go to therapy and you're not just walking in there completely, don't know anything about anything. And the therapist is trying to ask questions. But I think having some self-awareness and just going, what is this really about? instead of just reacting to your emotions, like emotion, come, flood, get over, get through it, reflect.
That's great. And you talk a lot about nervous system regulation. Can you share a simple daily practice that helps create safety in the body? I know we talk a lot about this, but maybe just as a little reminder for our audience.
Sure. And my favorite one is breathing. We all have to breathe anyway. So it's that in for 3, hold for 3, out for 6. That's something you can do anywhere, anytime. Another little teaser one for when we do some EMDR interviewing at some point is to do a slower tap. So like a 1,000, 2, 1,000, and do it like sometimes people will do like butterfly hugs. So I'll be like 1,000, 2, 1,000, like that. Or you can even tap like on, you can't see me, but tap on your thighs. Like I'll have kids that are in school do that. So they're not sitting there looking like everybody's like, what are you doing? But I would say, and we call that bilateral stimulation. That's what EMDR is based on. But bilateral meaning one side of the body and then the other side of the body, because our bodies are cut in half. Anyway, so like tap, tap, you can even tap your feet, and you got to do it in that sort of slow way. That's a way to kind of bring your body down and start regulating your nervous system. And for those of us with kids, it's like, remember when we would rock the baby? Everybody rocks the baby slow. Nobody rocks the baby like this because that stimulates them. So it's that same sort of process with the slow rocking, tapping.
That's great. Thank you for that. So what role does self-compassion play in trauma recovery, especially when people might feel really frustrated by how long the healing is taking?
So if I had $1 for every time I said, give yourself some grace for what you've been through and what you're going through and what you will go through, I probably wouldn't have to work anymore. But yes, like self-compassion. So this is where some of the reflection can be helpful. So sometimes people come in and they tell me what's been going on for the week. And I'm like, look, you just told me this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing and this thing. Gosh, no wonder you're exhausted because you have 5 times more things going on than normal. Well, I never really put it all together. Well, yeah. When somebody out loud says to you, here's all the stuff that you're going through, you can hear it from different ears and say, my gosh, I am going through a lot. And this is temporary and I can be okay. And so just giving yourself grace to say, this is what's happening now. This is not what has to happen forever.
Absolutely. Is it possible to completely heal from trauma, or is the goal more about learning how to respond differently when it shows up?
I would say that healing versus healed and learning how to respond differently is definitely part of the equation. That has to be sort of the initial part, because if we can't respond differently to trauma, it really is hard to begin the healing process. Like there are some things that we can do, but we have to be able to see it from the lens of this can be different, right? We're back to sort of a little bit of grace and self-compassion. People get stuck in, this is always going to be this way. This always has been this way. It always will be this way. No, have some insight, have some self-compassion. Look at yourself and say, I can be different. I can do things in a way that's healthier. And so, yes, I mean, the answer to your question is yes, both, right? But we're going to look at healing instead of healed, because the reality is traumatic things are going to continue to happen to us forever. Like there is no one and done with, okay, we may heal some big traumas, like some big things that we target, and we may feel better from those. And what people need to remember is that healing isn't forgetting. Healing isn't never thinking about it again. Healing is oh my gosh, that thing happened and I'm okay now, right? And I survived and I can keep going. If we're forgetting about the traumas, if we're forgetting about the situations, that's not the work. The work is being able to get on the other side of it and see it from a different perspective.
Beautiful. Yes, I love that. So I would love to hear a client story that really illustrates what happens when someone starts doing the trauma healing work and finally feels like themselves again.
The best way to answer this is like a compilation, right? Is when people graduate or move out of therapy, and eventually we want everybody to leave therapy, right? You should not be in there's very few people that should be in therapy for a lifetime. So when people move out of therapy, it is things like, I no longer have thoughts or flashbacks or nightmares. I believe in myself. I feel hope. I feel confidence. I see myself differently. I see the world differently. Any of those shifts out of victim mentality, that thought that all of these things happen to me and I can't deal with it and I can't be okay, into a more survivor attitude where we say those things happen and I'm okay.
That's beautiful. Yes. So I'm going to put you on the spot. And if you don't want to answer it, you don't have to. But what is something you personally had to relearn or unlearn in your own healing journey that might really surprise our listeners?
Okay. Surprise. I don't know. I've probably told so many stories. Who knows if I've told these before? But I would say that for me, it's probably the catastrophizing, right? So it's like sort of that Chicken Little response, like, the sky is falling. So as soon as one thing goes bad, it feels like this domino effect, right? It's like, okay, for my example is it took me a while to find my son a car, and then he wasn't ready to drive it because he hadn't done enough practice yet. And then I didn't get him registered for the bus because I thought he'd be ready to drive to school. And then I panicked and I'm like, everything is wrong. I'm the most terrible mother in the entire world. And then I started seeing evidence all over my life where I was a terrible mother and I had made all of these mistakes. And I finally had to just go, I mean, this is recent. Like, this is literally like a couple of weeks ago. And I finally was like, okay, like, breathe. This is like literally 2 events that happened. This is not the entirety of your experience being a mother. Calm down. It'll be okay. And then he got on the bus. They went ahead and put him in, even though I had missed the deadline. He's still practicing his driving. He is taking the bus to school until he's ready. And our lives just kept going.
I think that's perfect. I think this is a perfect story to share because it does happen that quickly, where we spiral out of control and we're like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? But if we learn these techniques and we learn how to be able to soothe ourselves and calm ourselves down, really can, it might take a few days. There might be, it might take hours or a few days. I get that, but we're not living in it in months and years. Like, I know sometimes in the past we might have, and it really does change everything. So I love that. And so I only have a couple more questions for you, but that story really leads into the next one, which is this. What would you say to the woman listening who's holding it all together on the outside, but really does feel like she's unraveling on the inside?
Obviously, my answer is going to be therapy, but in reality, it's some of the things that I've already said, which is giving yourself grace, looking at everything from a different viewpoint, maybe having some rational thoughts if you can get those in. But I would say, like, the biggest thing and why therapy works and why coaching works is because we're taking all of our I call it the hamster wheel. I call that overthinking the hamster wheel. And it's when we take that hamster wheel and we speak it to somebody else, whether it's a friend or a neighbor or a colleague or a coach or a therapist, and we speak it out loud, we remove that energy. So in the very beginning, I said trauma is like an energy that lives in our body. Every time we have a trauma response or a trigger response, that creates energy. And so when we speak these things out loud or even write them down, we are removing some of that energy. And so to me, along with the breathing and the grace, those are the best ways to say, okay, let's try to give ourselves a little space here, take time for us, and then just move forward in the best way that we can.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing all of this around trauma with us, because this has been really insightful. And I think that our listeners will get a ton out of it. So where can our listeners go if they want to work with you or learn more about trauma-informed healing?
You can go to my website, which is www.kristenburrus.com. And that will link you to everything, including this podcast and my Instagram and my Facebook account and my TikTok and our podcasts. That is the most consolidated way to do it. You will see information about me, how I do things, what I do, the type of populations that I work with. And I provide services in person in Kansas and Missouri, which is the states that I'm licensed in for mental health. But I'm also opening up coaching, trauma coaching, to the greater population. There's little nuances about what I can and can't do as a coach versus a therapist, but it really is something that can still bring a lot of relief and get the job done. And of course, as a therapist, I know when we've gotten to a place where I can no longer help you as a coach perspective and can guide you on how to get your own personal therapist.
Oh, that's great. And her website will be linked in the show notes, as we do with everyone's. So all you have to do is go down into the show notes and click that link, and she will be there, and you won't regret it, because she is amazing at what she does. So thank you all for joining us. If you got some insight out of this, we would love to hear from you. Drop us a note in the show notes or send us an email. Our email is always in the show notes. And just let us know what you got out of it, how it went for you, and really where you're at. And also don't forget to give us 5 stars and subscribe so that you always know when we put a new podcast episode out.
And I would love to know if there's any other therapy topics that you guys would like to hear about, any different diagnoses or anything like that. I know we did one, I think, on some diagnoses, and this one was about trauma and PTSD. So if you need any more information or have any questions, pop a comment in there, send us an email, and we'll be sure to get a podcast together to get more information out to you. So I really appreciate everybody listening today, and Jen for your kind words. And we will see you guys next time. Thank you for being here with us today.
If today's episode hit home, don't just keep it to yourself. Subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who needs to hear it, because everyone deserves to know their worth.
Next week, we're diving even deeper with more insights and tools to help you break free from limitations and live authentically.
Until then, keep raising your standards, owning your worth, and embracing your value.